It's a pleasure to be joined now by Orioles Executive Vice President and General Manager Mike Elias. Mike, thanks so much for hopping on the Hot Stove Show.
You bet, Paul.
So
Good to be here.
Let's start with your most recent big addition to the Orioles roster, and that was the trade for Cole Irvin. You sent out Darell Hernaiz in order to get this lefty. What do you think he brings to Baltimore, and what kind of role will he fill on this Orioles team?
We expect him to be in our rotation. I think it's a terrific fit. You know, you look at our rotation options right now, it's thin on left-handed pitchers. Cole's left-handed. He threw a ton of innings last year, and between him and Kyle Gibson, I think we have two of the innings leaders of Major League Baseball for the past 2 seasons, guys that have thrown a lot of quality starts, and it should help alleviate a lot of the load off of some of our younger pitchers that haven't accrued as much work in the major leagues. Hopefully reduce some of the onus on the bullpen, and I think he's a very competitive guy that throws strikes, works very quickly, very, very low walk totals, can really pitch. He's got 5 pitches. It's good to get an accomplished left-handed starter like him in our ballpark.
Going back to the middle of last year, you mentioned that trades like this could be a possibility, where you send out one of your prospects. The Orioles farm system just had 8 prospects named to the top 100 according to MLB Pipeline. With such a loaded farm system, do you feel like more trades like this, where you send out a shortstop prospect, one of your top 30 prospects, in order to get a veteran big leaguer, do you think that these become more likely now?
I think they will in the future. They're very hard to do because you can dream on these guys. You've drafted them, you've developed them. You're picturing 6 or 7 years, if not more, with the team that you're possibly giving up. And Darell Hernaiz was somebody that was not easy for us to give up, and we gave up a lot of reluctance. You know, he's got some tools. He's a young kid with a bright future ahead of him. But the reality is with the way the roster rules are structured, we can't keep everyone. And we do have a bit of a pipeline of infielders built up in the minor leagues. We need starting pitching at the major league level right now. I thought it was a good fit for both sides, and like you mentioned, we think the depth in the farm system to keep doing this as the team gets increasingly competitive the next couple of years. We had 8, as you mentioned, top 100 prospects in MLB and in Baseball America. ESPN just came out, and we had 9. So I'm really excited about the options that type of farm system is going to present us.
Yeah, Cade Povich sneaking into the top 60 in that ranking. Certainly the only top 50, top 100 for Cade Povich. That was exciting to see. So let's turn the page to first base here. You have Ryan Mountcastle, obviously, as your primary first baseman, but barring another addition, who do you see as Mountcastle's primary backup? And would the 26-man roster have room for somebody like a Lewin Diaz or a Ryan O'Hearn?
I think this is going to be one of the more interesting aspects of camp competition in Sarasota this year, because we have a ton of options. We do recognize that we want to have another quality defensive option at first base available on the roster to allow Ryan to get rest, obviously, or go DH. I think it would make sense for that to be a left-handed hitter so that we can make those decisions around pitching matchups against tough right-handed pitchers. But there's really no one in my mind that has an inside track for this. And on top of it, we've got some interesting stories in camp with Anthony Santander, who's been working at his first base game for the last year or so. Did it a little bit in the minor leagues with Cleveland, but it's been a while. And then Adley Rutschman, who we had play some first base coming up in the minors to prepare for this. So I think those guys, are on the radar screen for this. But then also we've spent all winter pulling in options that are off of the 40-man roster right now. Ryan O'Hearn, Lewin Diaz, who you mentioned, Franchi Cordero, who came in on a minor league deal, Josh Lester, Taron Vavra can play some first base. We had him doing it last year. So there's going to be a ton of guys. I don't know which way this is going to fall, but this is going to be something that we just kind of decide during camp.
Another area of glut on this roster right now is certainly starting pitching. You add Cole Irvin. Grayson Rodriguez certainly had an opportunity to debut and maybe be in that rotation before he suffered that lat strain in the middle of 2022. At this juncture, do you feel like he's done enough to put himself in an inside track to get a spot in this starting rotation when this team breaks camp?
I think so. I think he does have an inside track. I think we're kind of pulling for him to make it. In some ways, this might be a slot for him to lose, so to speak, going into spring training, because he really had gotten to the point of showing us the performance that we needed to see in AAA, and we were in the process of stretching him out, and the timing was terrible, but he pulled a really close to being called up to the majors. And so, I think that the work that he's done in AAA, he's now on the 40-man roster. We have a lot of excitement for him. He's going to get a very full major league camp with the team, and I hope he makes the rotation.
Another top prospect and a lefty, DL Hall. Last year, at the end of the year, when he was brought up as a reliever, you said he still had some work to do developmentally to be a big league starter long term. Do you feel like this offseason might have presented him that opportunity, and does he go into spring training with an opportunity to become a starter?
Well, he's coming into spring training as a starter. He's been training that way. I think it's going to be a really important camp for him. He's different than Grayson in that he had not kind of shown everything we need to see as a starting pitcher in AAA. He's had some injuries the last couple of years. The innings coverage from him start to start has been inconsistent. The stuff has always been there. He was on the 40-man roster. We needed some help down the stretch. We thought it'd be a really good experience for him to come up and pitch out of the pen for us, and he did. And he had some really big moments, big save in Yankee Stadium, kind of showed what he could do. But now it's time to focus back on his career, which to us at this point is as a starting pitcher. So he's going to be in the rotation competition as well. I can't wait to see what he does, and we'll keep an open mind on him if it makes sense for him to be a contributor out of the pen. I don't know that we'll close off that possibility, but our hope is for him to be a starting pitcher.
Looks like a lot of guys that could be starting pitchers come opening day in this Orioles pitching staff. With the additions of Irvin, you have prospects like Rodriguez and DL Hall to add to Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish. Could this team utilize a six-man rotation out of the gate, or would you go with a piggyback situation like you did last year?
It's tempting, and it makes some sense to look at it. I think the problem with that would be that it shortens our bullpen, and you now have a rule where you're only allowed to have 13 pitchers on your roster at any point in time. So if you think about it, if you have 6 starters, the other, you only have 7 relievers, and they're doing more work than if they had 8 relievers. So it has some trade-offs. I wouldn't rule it out. You look at the schedule, there's off days that scattered throughout the schedule that kind of give you a chance to give your starters an extra day. We'll just see. I mean, I think it's something that we'll have to look at, but it can be hard to pull off with the rules of Major League Baseball this day and age.
3 prospects in the infield who all reached AAA by the end of the 2022 season: Jordan Westberg, Joey Ortiz, Connor Norby. They all performed very well last year, but they all seemingly have their paths blocked to the big leagues. What would have to happen over the course of the season, or even in spring training, for one of those guys to make it up to Baltimore and to get regular playing time?
Yeah, I don't look at it that they're blocked at all. I mean, first of all, they all have work left to do at AAA, although they've all already had tastes of good success in AAA, which is awesome to see. But these are guys that can play multiple positions. We need hitters. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be a bench to fill out. I could see any or all of those guys impacting this team, as early as the spring, maybe even right out of camp. So I don't see any of them as blocked. I just think we've got depth, we've got options. You need a lot of players to get through a season.
And you already mentioned having depth, having those options. Are there any areas on the team right now over the coming 2 weeks before we get to spring training, or even during spring training, that you feel like this team could still address and your front office could go and address on this team?
Well, yeah, I think we're in a nice position where we feel like we've got a relatively complete group, if that's how we roll into spring training. But we're certainly looking for upgrades and opportunities, and we've got 2 weeks left before spring training starts. There are a few free agents left that we're interested in. Trade talks are actually a little faster now than they were a month ago, which is kind of how the Cole Irvin thing came together. And so we're looking at all that, and we have 9 or 10 guys that you could conceive breaking camp in the rotation, but that doesn't mean we're not going to look at upgrades. The infield's pretty full, but we're looking for some additional depth there, perhaps. In the outfield too, or in the DH spot in particular, there's a chance to have some more at-bats available for somebody who might provide an upgrade. So I think we're in a nice spot here down the stretch with 2 weeks to go, where we're not desperate for anything, but we have room to assess some new moves and some new opportunities.
And your front office traditionally has made a lot of moves right before spring training, during spring training. February has been certainly a busy time for you. if you weren't to make any major moves or major additions to this roster, would you feel comfortable going into Sarasota on February 14th or 15th with the current group that you have right now?
Yeah, I think we're pretty pleased with the options that we have provided by our farm system, the group of guys on our 40-man roster, and then also the NRI non-roster invitations that we're bringing into camp. I think we have enough here to put together a team in spring training. Like I said, we're still going to be assessing opportunities out there on the market, and I would probably handicap that, maybe we bring somebody else into this camp in some way, shape, or form before it gets started. But there's also a lot of possibilities in baseball to make moves in the middle and at the end of camp as players exercise out clauses or trades are struck. So it's a really active time period.
Absolutely. Well, you are going to be active over the course of this weekend with Birdland Caravan going out into Birdland and getting to meet some Orioles fans. So we'll let you go. Orioles Executive Vice President and General Manager Mike Elias, thanks so much for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks for having me.